Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into, well, one of humanity's most profound riddles. Why do we strive so fiercely to belong, even when the cost is, frankly, unimaginably high?
Yes, sometimes demanding the sacrifice of our deepest loyalties, even, to our own families.
It's a question that really gets to the core of what it means to be human, doesn't it? And how our identities are shaped not just by who we are, but who we are with.
Exactly. And in this deep dive, we're going to unpack the complex, often paradoxical nature of belonging, not just as a feeling, like a personal thing, but as a potent socio-political force.
Right. We'll explore its deep psychological grip, how it molds our identities and its powerful role in collective action, especially in regions marked by intense conflict.
And our source material today draws from the deeply personal and intellectual thoughts of AY. He is a psychoanalyst and writer, born in Israel-Palestine, now living in New York.
We'll delve into his forthcoming book, Belonging and Its Discontents, and his experiences navigating, well, dual identities and the intense pressures of geopolitical conflict, particularly around the events of October 7th, 2023.
Our mission here really is to extract the crucial insights into how our fundamental need to belong can pull us into these powerful collective narratives, how they influence our very sense of self and the choices we make, particularly when the stakes feel existential.
So let's unpack this through AY's own journey. It really sets the stage, doesn't it? He was born in what he refers to as Israel-Palestine, which, as he points out, is already a political statement in itself.
Right off the bat, yeah.
He was raised with these powerful narratives of ownership, told they belonged to the land and it belonged to them. But later he realized these stories had a clear ideological agenda.
An agenda that was actively erasing Palestinian histories, names, even ruins. That must have created such a deep tension for him even early on.
Absolutely. What's truly fascinating here is how early he recognized the political nature of narrative itself. This wasn't just like family history.
No, it was a deeply ingrained collective story shaping identity. And this understanding became absolutely critical when he reached military age.
Which raises a really important question for all of us, I think. What happens when your personal ethics clash head-on with these powerful collective narratives?
Well, AY famously refused to serve in the Israeli army. His objection was the occupation, which he noted was, and I'm quoting here, much, much less horrible than it is now, but it was already pretty horrible.
And he faced this stark dilemma. Either go to jail, doing repeated 30-day stints for maybe 6 months, maybe a year.
Or seek a psychiatric diagnosis.
Yeah.
He chose the latter.
And he described that as this arduous blurring process, performing illness until he started questioning his own sanity.
The layers there are just incredible. It wasn't just a personal choice, was it? It came with immense collective pressure.
And here's where it gets really unsettling. His parents, who at first tried to persuade him not to refuse service, then actively used their connections, apparently even involving the defense minister, to actually obstruct his path to getting that diagnosis.
Wow. So they flipped completely.
Completely. And that experience lodged this core question in his mind, this riddle he says he still works on today. How is it possible that the people who love and raise you can turn against you so violently if you're moving against the group that we all belong to?
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And deeply disturbing. It suggests there's a force there that's even stronger than familial love.
Exactly. So this really personal riddle then propelled AY into a broader intellectual journey. He dove into philosophy, sociology, social theory.
Exploring thinkers like Foucault, the Frankfurt School, Althusser, Deleuze, the big names.
And what he found compelling was their concept of a social unconscious. These subtle, often unseen ways that society's ideologies and norms shape our experiences, often without us even realizing it.
Right. But while those theories showed how society influences us, AY felt they didn't fully explain the individual's internal response. The why.
He wanted to understand, what is it inside the person that makes the person the individual become part of that machine?
Yeah, basically what makes us turn or answer the call or respond to the order or just accept the control, the management of these social forces.
So after all that intellectual searching, what was the core realization he came to? What did he identify as the fundamental drive behind this intense need for belonging?
Well, he argues that the need to belong, to be part of groups, is so essential that it makes us willing to do almost anything.
Almost anything.
Without it, a person, he says, can't really exist. Doesn't make sense for yourself. Isn't a subject of something? It's fundamental, not just a preference,
That's a huge claim about something we maybe take for granted. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, How does he define this powerful, essential belonging? What does it really encompass?
He describes it as having this kind of dual nature. On one hand, sure, it includes attachment, affiliation, emotional involvement, identification, the feelings of connection,
The warm, fuzzy stuff?
sort of. But crucially, it also includes ownership, responsibility, rights, and importantly, debts.
Debts?
Yeah. To belong means to feel something, to have something, and fundamentally, to owe something to the group.
Okay. So what does that look like?
Well, it can extend to allegiance, mutual responsibility, and, in extreme situations, sacrifice, even risking one's life or the lives of one's children in fighting the collective wars.
Wow. So it's definitely not just a cozy feeling. It comes with a steep price tag, potentially the ultimate one. And he directly ties this to our identity, right? He says belonging is identity.
He really emphasizes that. Belonging is the foundation of who I am. Think about how we use the term. Like you mentioned, you belong to me in a love song.
Or a parent saying, "You are my child."
Exactly. And groups claim us, too,
Yeah.
saying you are mine. But this strong pull also leads to this, equally powerful impulse to unbelong.
You resist it.
Yeah, people resist or try to escape groups that claim them, refusing identifications, transitioning identities, losing religious faith, immigrating, trying to shed our belongings, as he puts it.
And the painful flip side of that is when the group actively rejects us.
Precisely. Groups can abandon us, deny our existence, try to control or change us, scapegoat us, even attempt to erase us, basically declare us enemies.
It makes sense then that he points out that these social links, even though they seem strong, are surprisingly tenuous.
Making our identities uncertain and frail. We're constantly, he says, locating and articulating the selves that we form via the matrix of our belonging and unbelonging.
He uses a really interesting psychoanalytic concept here, too, describing the self not as fixed, but as an ongoing project.
Right, like Winnicott's transitional object, something we continuously shape and reshape. It's part sensed, part imagined, part owned, part given on loan by the world around.
So our sense of self is just constantly being negotiated within these social connections. It's inherently fragile.
Exactly. And this perspective really challenges that traditional individualistic view often found in psychoanalysis. AUI argues we deeply strive to belong. We seek attachment, that feeling of being pulled into a community's bosom.
And this deep desire makes us so afraid of being rejected, excommunicated, exiled, that we spend most of our life's energy making sure that we're not.
That fear of rejection.
Yeah.
It sounds like a powerful engine behind a lot of our collective behavior, doesn't it?
Absolutely. To even doubt your belonging is to flirt with betrayal of loved ones, of loyalties, especially because, communities are crucial for our survival.
And this brings us to the inherent internal violence present in societies. He references René Girard's theory of scapegoating.
Where a group targets an outsider to manage its own internal conflicts.
Exactly. That competitive murderousness. And of course, Freud's civilization and its discontents. That tension between individual desires and societal demands. AY characterizes the forces holding us as love and a kind of passionate gravity.
Love and passionate gravity.
Yeah, and these manifest as two fundamental pulls: collective desire, the drive to belong, and collective violence, the potential destructiveness of belonging. At best, their intention. At worst,
they can annihilate the subject. Okay, let's shift gears a bit now to AY's more recent personal experience. His third psychoanalysis. He made a conscious choice, right, to connect to his roots by having an Israeli Hebrew-speaking analyst in Tel Aviv.
He did. But what he found was that even the physical location of the analytic room became this powerful, unsettling symbol of all these geopolitical forces at play.
Oh, so?
Well, the analyst's house itself stood on the ruins of a former Arab village, Sheikh Munis. And then literally right across the road was this vast government compound.
Housing.
Israeli Army Public Relations, Mossad, and the Shin Bet, Israel's internal security agency, the one operating in occupied territories. That proximity, he said, was a constant, tangible reminder of the state of exception ruling the territory.
That legal political concept where normal rules get suspended, granting extraordinary powers.
Exactly. A stark reminder of how the conflict just pervades daily life there.
And there was that detail about his American phone disconnecting near the compound, while Israeli phones stayed open to surveillance.
Yeah, a constant reminder of what goes on behind the tall trees, as he put it. He even developed this vivid image of Tal.
The imaginary soldier listening in.
Right, this 18 or 20-year-old soldier, maybe reassigned from monitoring Palestinian phones for blackmail opportunities. He and his analyst would sometimes even speak to her in their sessions.
And this imagined surveillance had a real impact, didn't it? leading to self-censorship.
Very real. He found himself hinting at things, especially sensitive stuff, rather than stating it outright, particularly after early 2023 with the new government's moves against democracy.
So this experience led him to pose this crucial question. Is reality a detriment to psychoanalysis?
Yeah. While some analysts think external reality distracts from inner depth, AY argues that a totally separate inside is basically a delusion. He asserts that when you go all the way in, you find otherness, and ultimately, the unconscious is politics.
So the geopolitical, the social, the collective, it's all within us. It fundamentally shapes our collective identifications and our very selfhoods. This psychosocial register isn't just external.
No, it's fundamental to our subjectivity, he argues. And this thinking, which he was developing on the threshold of belonging, as he put it, well, it dramatically shifted after October 7th, 2023.
The Hamas attack, 1,200 killed, 200 hostages.
It transformed that intellectual threshold into a fault line, he says, with everyone just clawing not to fall into an abyss.
And in their first session after the war began, he and his analysts found themselves grappling with this incredibly unsettling ethical calculus: Hiroshima or Auschwitz?
Yeah. Pondering whether distant murder, like the Israeli Air Force bombing Gaza, is somehow better than close-range, slow killing by Hamas, wrestling with which killing we identify with, what killers we are consenting to be, just gut-wrenching stuff.
It really speaks to how war can reduce identity to what the philosopher Giorgio Agamben called bare life.
Exactly. Where victims are killed simply for who you are or where you are, like the Thai field workers or Filipino aid workers caught in the crossfire. It highlights that within a collectivity, there is no subject that is not a political subject.
And yet, it makes you question, is there such a thing as just bare human life before all those collective identifications kick in?
It's a deep question. And here's an example AY gives that just lays bare the power of these collective loyalties. It's chilling.
Which one?
He describes a West Bank settler leader who said he was willing to see his own son die for the cause of establishing a Jewish theocracy.
Wow.
Starkly contrasting with an article he saw titled, "Your Son Does Not Belong to You." It demonstrates how, at this volcanic borderland where collective pressures melt together the political and the ethical sometimes, our loyalty to the collective supersedes our loyalty to our children.
That is profoundly disturbing.
It really is, and AY argues that at such extreme moments, only Freud's deeper concepts like the life drive, eros, and the death drive, thanatos, can truly account for these intense levels of hate and revenge, things that more superficial relational theories might miss.
How else, he asks, can you explain a father sacrificing his son for an attachment to myth, to ideology, to fantasy that's stronger than flesh and blood? He brings up Abraham and Isaac.
So the community's commanding power, he says, can be more commanding than the adhesiveness of our love relations. Our association with collective narratives can become stronger than our attachments to our own lives.
And he connects these intense collective allegiances, this rage, directly to Freud's concept of the superego, that internalized grip of the social on our bodies and minds.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it? Social life is this constant trade-off between freedom and safety. And paradoxically, this fundamental need to belong might even mean dying.
So pulling these threads together, AY really highlights this profound tension. On one side, the incredible fragility of our belonging, that constant fear of exclusion. And on the other, this almost fanatical desire to destroy the other just to preserve it.
It suggests that because belonging is so necessary, yet so precarious, we're willing to do almost anything to keep it.
This also helps explain that powerful feeling of being a traitor. If you even think about moving away from a group's loyalty, society literally sits in us, gives us our identity. Breaking away is incredibly hard.
And beyond just fear, there's also that passionate gravity he talks about, the pull that brings people together, the energy of the mob, the collective drive to storm, expand, war.
We saw this play out so powerfully in Israeli society after October 7th, didn't we? AY notes how before the attack, Israeli society was breaking up, almost a civil war brewing.
Yeah, deep divisions.
But after the Hamas attack, he says, everybody forgot they had disagreements. Even previous objectors rushed to join the bombing efforts. This immense trauma led to levels of destruction that many, including him, deemed unjustified by any military logic.
And he shares this deeply unsettling realization he had.
The comparison to Nazi Germany.
Yes, but it's crucial to understand how he means it. He says, as an Israeli now, he begins to understand what it was like being a German during the Nazi period. Not comparing the events, but the
The
feeling.
psychological experience.
Right, of objecting deeply, inwardly, yet feeling completely helpless and losing oneself in an overwhelming collective movement, that chilling sense of being absorbed.
That's a powerful analogy for a psychological state. It also raises the question, is belonging always symmetrical?
He suggests maybe not. Often there's an asymmetry of sacrifice, implying there's a figure to whom one sacrifices God, a leader, which can hint at a kind of sexualized servitude or even terror.
He also talks about how our very idea of subjectivity of self is kind of structured like a nation state.
Yeah, with the internal homogeneity, patrolling borders, normal routines get disrupted when a collective process takes over, leading people to act, sometimes even with a kind of pleasure or excitement, without fully grasping why.
This connects to the violence inherent even in concepts like homeland. He mentions homesickness, Heimweh, as potentially a lethal form of depression.
And highlights the inherent, even local violence tied to the idea of Heimat, the German word for homeland, suggesting these forces are older than the modern nation-state.
Now, AY is careful. He makes a deliberate choice not to speak for Palestinian belonging struggles, though he mentions ongoing correspondence with a Palestinian colleague.
Right. He sees his own self-examination as recognizing that his belonging comes at the increasingly dear expense of other people.
And he also explains why he feels Fanon's theories on colonized psychology don't fully capture the Israel-Palestine situation.
Yeah, he argues that indigenous Palestinians, despite everything, managed to keep their sense of self, even with the huge military and economic imbalance.
Despite the bleakness, though, he does present a cautious hope.
Yeah, a very cautious one. That maybe Jews and Palestinians might somehow relax a little bit their collective identity enough to forge new kinds of collectivity. He notes this is particularly relevant given that many Jews don't have anywhere to go back to, thinking of the legacy of post-WWII refugees.
We've talked a lot about the destructive side, the pull towards Thanatos, the death drive. But can there ever be a good sacrifice? Can a just war be an expression of eros, the life drive, not just destruction?
AY really grapples with that. He highlights how incredibly difficult it is to determine a just war, emphasizing that the justification goes to the question of history and historical truth. It's not simple.
Which brings us back to psychoanalysis itself. Isn't belonging, in some ways, precisely what psychoanalysis is meant to unhinge us from? Isn't it sometimes a symptom?
It's a core question. He links this back to Freud's own disillusionment after World War I, which led him to the concept of the death drive these inherent forces pulling us back towards tribalism, towards destruction, despite enlightenment or progress.
He also explores this idea of a melancholic process, holding on to a decaying entity or an illusion, like a unified country that's perhaps already gone, but people cling to it, even at the cost of life.
And suggests that sometimes too much diversity, too much possibilities can paradoxically trigger a pullback to simplicity, to very strict, rigid categories, even if it's against your own interest.
We see that in certain political appeals, don't we, to rigid ideologies. He notes the unapologetic nature of such appeals can be highly attractive.
Finally, he touches on the essential, sometimes weird, nature of talking about politics and therapy, especially for people navigating these fractured national identities.
For AY, it's essential because your sense of self is so deeply tied to your country's actions. If your country becomes, in your view, a monster, your own sense of belonging, yourself, can feel annihilated. It leads to deep grief.
And because these internal dynamics are so entrenched, he suggests deep-seated conflicts like Israel-Palestine might actually require a lot of international intervention, not just money and weapons to be broken down.
Yeah.
He feels there's an internal lack of collective consciousness or will to change, particularly noting that, in his observation, Palestinians are much more ready to talk to compromise.
And this really signals a fundamental shift he sees in psychoanalysis itself, moving away from seeing political talk as just acting out.
Towards recognizing how the social has to be part of the individual, that the two can no longer be separated out.
So, after all that, what does this deep dive mean for you, the listener? We've explored this profound human need to belong, its compelling power, its hidden costs, and how it shapes who we are, especially under the intense pressures of geopolitical conflict.
You've gained insight, hopefully, into how collective attachments can bind us, sometimes pulling us towards ideologies stronger even than kinship, and how the external world, politics, history, it really permeates the deepest aspects of our inner lives. Our very concept of self is tangled up with the groups we claim and the groups that claim us.
Now, here's something to consider. In an increasingly polarized world, where the pressure to choose sides, to declare loyalties, seems to intensify daily, what personal compromises are you willing to make to maintain your own sense of belonging?
And maybe just as importantly, what might you gain, or perhaps lose, by daring to question that collective gravitational pull that helps define who you think you are?